Welcome to the Jaybefaunt channel. I am your host, James Fauntleroy. So good to see all of you here on this beautiful Saturday evening. The Jaybefaunt channel is available on all major podcast platforms, so go ahead, subscribe there. Also part of Revolutionary Blackout Network, so you can find me there on Sundays and Thursdays. If you guys have not already, please go ahead and give a like to the stream. That pushes me out into the algorithm so that I can be able to reach more people as we speak. So thank you so very much for that. If you have not already, you guys can also go to jaybefaunt.substack.com so you guys can get alerted to those email notifications of whenever I go live, upload clips, or write any articles. You have that there and square. So thank you so very much there. By the way, we are live. Yes, you are seeing me live. If you are in the chat, saying your hellos, it is so good to see all of you here today joining me for this. This is going to be a new one. So whenever we embark on a new book, I like to go over the author a little bit. I like to talk about, what my hopes are for this book. So I would like to get into that too. So what are we going to be discussing today? Well, we will be getting into the new book, reading of Prejudential, Black America and the Presidents by friend to the channel, Margaret Kimberly. So I am so excited to get into this book because, number one, Margaret Kimberly is a intellectual and an author that has so many great insights into geopolitics, into domestic policy, into the news of the day. And so getting a book written by her and being able to read it and glean a lot of the information that she imparts in it, number one, is a privilege. Number two, one of the things that I set out to do was to cover a lot of Black authors. Now, excuse me, I'm not going to be able to do all Black authors, right? Because there's a lot of people who write some very good things that we should take to heart as well. Like, for instance, I read a book by Dr. Devon Price, and I read a book by, oh my God, I can't believe I'm blanking on the name. I read a book by Michael Parenti. And so between Dr. Devon Price and Michael Parenti, they're not Black. So, of course, but at the same time, they talk about the issues involving imperialism, the issues involving capitalism. One talks about the truths that the United States has done, which we need to keep, in mind, because there's a lot of things that are true that are really the dirty laundry of the United States that a lot of people don't keep in mind. And then Dr. Devon Price talked about how imperialism and capitalism also affects us on a very deep human level in regards to how we view ourselves and how we view others as being lazy. So, it's very good to go over a lot of these books. I would say the majority of books that I covered are actually from Black authors: Melodoma Some, George Jackson, Asada Shakur, Bell Hooks. So, of course, I would like to give a lot of emphasis to Black authors. And especially I want to do a special emphasis on Black female authors for the reason that their voices aren't as amplified as it should be, in my opinion. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to focus on Margaret Kimberly's book as well. So we also have Jacqueline coming in and joining, saying, hey, Jaybefaunt, looking forward to this book by Margaret Kimberly. I am so happy that you are too. It is a very interesting format, and I cannot wait to get into this. So with that all being said, just checking the Rockfin. We are good. Just check in. I think we're good on the Rumble. Well, actually, no, something happened with the Rumble. Not able to get into it. But we shall press on. And good to see you. Margaret Kimberly's in the chat. No pressure, JB. No pressure. All right. So here we go. Margaret Kimberly's book, Prejudential, Black America and the Presidents. We're going to start on the preface because I think the preface is also very important to get into. This really sets the stage, especially for how Mrs. Kimberly, or as I like to call her affectionately, Auntie Margaret, sets this up. And so it is very interesting, very good. It's not very long. But, you know, just like a side of collard greens, you don't need a whole lot. It packs a punch. All right. All right. So let's get into it. Oh, by the way, do you have your tea? Make sure you have your tea. Gotta get to that. All right. So preface. In 1956, I shall not go to the polls. I have not registered. I believe that democracy has so far disappeared into the United States that no two evils exist. There is but one evil party with two names, and it will be elected despite all I can do or say. That was from W.E.B. Du Bois in 1956. Once upon a time, there were millions of people living on a continent. They were invaded by people from a distant part of the world. These newcomers killed the inhabitants via military attacks, infectious diseases, and outright theft of their lands. The invaders also kidnapped other human beings from yet another part of the world and enslaved them on stolen land. More than 200 years after the invaders appeared, there was a war that ended slavery but accelerated the extermination of the indigenous residents. More invaders came until they had claimed the entire continent. The political and economic system of this land was built on these crimes. These are undeniable truths of American history and can be asserted and summed up briefly, but the devil is always in the details. Americans like to think of themselves as an exceptional people bound together by noble ideals. This belief is challenged, however, when history is taught more honestly and truthfully, without omitting facts or telling outright lies. Presidents are outsized characters in America's narrative about itself. Children attend schools named after them. There are monuments dedicated to them in every state. They have their own national holiday, President's Day, which presents an opportunity for the country's virtues to be celebrated. We are conditioned to feel a deep connection to these men hundreds of years after some of them have died. The language used to create and protect presidential image is telling. The first several presidents were known as the Founding Fathers, a term that affirms patriarchy and white supremacy. George Washington is more than just the first president. He is the father of our country, quote unquote. Regardless of our group affiliations and histories, we are taught to see these people as benevolent figures, no matter what actions they took while in office. Most Americans are taught from childhood, for instance, that George Washington and Thomas Jefferson were brave and brilliant men in a number of ways. But the fact that both men owned human beings as slaves is rarely mentioned in telling their stories or assessing their character. I'm going to stop right there for a second. So here's my thing. Just like many of our revolutionary leaders in the Black community are whitewashed, white leaders are also whitewashed in this country. When you find out the gritty details of somebody like a James Madison or an Abraham Lincoln or James Monroe or William Howard Taft, you start to find the really gritty, nasty details about them that a lot of people want to keep behind the curtain. For instance, like a lot of people who consider themselves to be on the left praise FDR for a lot of the things that he did, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. But us Black people have a different view of FDR. And I think that has to be examined, right? What about, a lot of the presidents that participated in the further destruction and degradation and elimination of the indigenous peoples of occupied Turtle Island. What about them? How do they feel about some of these presidents? Right? And in order to be able to know where to go, you have to know where you've come from. And whitewashing it ain't it, baby. It ain't. It's not it. Because then you don't really know exactly where you came from. And it's like the old adage goes, those who do not study history are doomed to repeat it. Meaning you have to, and I will amend that those who do not study accurate, objective history are doomed to repeat it. Because if you do not study history and its objectivity and its accuracy, then therefore you are going to be repeating the same things. And I give an example of a lot of Zionists that keep pointing to the Holocaust, yet they're committing a Holocaust right now in Gaza. Because they're examining history, but they are not examining it in its most accurate form. Because now they're becoming the very same people that they swore that they would never become. And I'm not saying this about all of them. I'm saying this about the Zionists. And unfortunately, 40,000 people dead in 7 months. So we have to examine history deeply, and we also have to take that history and say, there were some people, maybe even in my own lineage, that were grimy, that were morally repugnant. And that's okay to come to terms with that. White people who are watching, some of y'all got some ancestors that were just horrible human beings. There's nothing you can do about it. And if you feel bad, that's okay to sit with that. That's okay. Just do the opposite of what they did, right? Learn from their mistakes or learn from their transgressions and then move forward and do better. Because when you know better, you do better. Okay, let's continue. Americans are not taught that the British offered freedom to the enslaved who fought on their side in the Revolutionary War. Abraham Lincoln, widely regarded as the great liberator, initially sought to limit the spread of slavery rather than to end it. So he was a reformist. And actively considered the option of deporting or segregating Black people to make America a whites-only society. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and John Kennedy are considered to have been good for Black people, even though they constantly feared antagonizing Southern segregationists and failed their constituents. It is particularly difficult to write about America's history without giving into the notion of patriotism, which includes suppressing certain narratives. Even those who think of themselves as progressive base their arguments for systemic change in terms of obedience to a cherished myths of great men. Despite claims to the contrary, Americans are highly indoctrinated in the belief of American superiority. Though the democratic process usually amounts to a series of compromises and incremental steps, emphasizing only those facts of history that make our great men look good, undermines the creation of the sense of inclusion and understanding necessary to improve the lives of all citizens. This book is an effort to shed a light on the truth. George Washington didn't have wooden teeth as commonly believed, but he did take teeth out of his slaves' mouths. He might not have chopped down a cherry tree, but when Philadelphia became the capital of the United States, he deliberately rotated his slaves out of Pennsylvania so as to avoid their being emancipated, as the law would have required. The very foundation of this country, the celebrated Declaration of Independence from Great Britain, was tainted by the fact that some delegates to the Second Continental Congress were keenly focused on the continuation of slavery. The case in which James Somerset, who was brought to London by his Bostonian slaveholder, was freed in 1772, threatened the future of slaveholding in the 13 colonies. He won his freedom based on the argument that the law of England did not support slavery. Many feared that the precedent might cheat an honest American of his slave, quote unquote. Why did the American Revolution happen? Did it just happen because of tax on tea? Why didn't they really like King George? Now, this is not me caping or saying anything good about a monarchy, because guess what? All monarchies need to end, right? But if they ended slavery and these guys didn't want to, well, wouldn't that be another reason to secede from the British crown? Oh, the tea is hot, baby. The tea is hot. You ready? Let's get into it. All of the men who became president were able to reach their high office in part because they swore an allegiance to American ideals that were built on tenets of conquest and enslavement. I'm going to read that again, baby, because it was good. Auntie Margaret, you did good on this sentence right here. All the men who became president were able to reach that high office in part because they swore an allegiance to American ideals that were built on the tenets of conquest and enslavement. Any wonder why Bush gave us the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq? Any wonder why Barack Obama turned 2 wars into 7? Any wonder why Donald Trump kept those wars going, and then he risked a war with Iran by the murder of Qasem Soleimani, an Iranian general? Any wonder why we call Joe Biden Genocide Joe? Any wonder why people like me are not going to vote for any of them? Let's continue. These truths are self-evident. The founding of the United States continued the conquest and genocide of the continents, and the founding of the United States continued the conquest and genocide of the continent's indigenous population and protected the practice of slavery. The legacies of predatory capitalism and anti-Black racism are a huge part of our collective story. None of this is ancient history that can be dismissed in the 21st century. These themes run deeply in our culture, and they should be acknowledged and understood. Aristotle said, quote, "If liberty and equality, as thought by some, are chiefly to be found in democracy, they will be attained when all persons alike share in government to the utmost," end quote. More than 2,300 years later, we're still not there. Americans need to recognize the malignancies that have threatened the healthier aspects of our shared history and continue to do so. If we are ever to have the opportunity to be fully realized as human beings, capable of living in peace among ourselves and the rest of the world, then we need to be honest with ourselves. To the extent that our leaders embody aspects of who we are as a people, studying how each president has participated in our nation's complicated and often shameful treatment of Black people is as good a place as any to start. That's the preface. Are you ready to go into number 1? Ooh-wee. Let's start off with number one. So I like how Margaret Kimberly breaks this up. So we're going to start off from 1789 to 1825, the Founding Fathers. So it gives a breakdown here. If you guys get this book, you guys get to see that breakdown. I highly recommend that you guys get it. So 1790, Maryland, Massachusetts, New York, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Vermont allow free Africans Americans to vote. 1793, the invention of the cotton gin increases the profitability of the slave labor. 1793 again, a federal fugitive slave law provides the return of the enslaved who escape and cross state lines. 1800, the U.S. Census shows 893,602 enslaved people in the country. It's funny because there were over 800,000, almost 900,000 enslaved Africans in this country, and yet over 200 years later, we're still only 13% of the population. I'll let you sit with that. 1808, Congress prohibits the slave trade, but illegal smuggling continues until 1860. So there was even a black market for our ancestors to be bought and sold. 1816, the American Colonization Society is formed to relocate free African Americans to Africa. 1820, the Missouri Compromise banned slavery above 36 degrees and 30 feet in latitude. Number one. Let's get it. Big George Washington. Woo, boy. Y'all get ready for this. From 1789 to 1797. Children learn in school that George Washington's false teeth were made of wood. I was taught that. That is not true. Some of his dentures were made out of ivory and metal, but some of them came from the human beings he owned. I love how she said human beings instead of slaves, because the thing is that she's humanizing our ancestors. They were human beings. Thank you. Washington became a slave owner at the age of 11 upon his father's death. He increased his wealth in 1759 when he married Martha Custis, a widow who had nearly 300 slaves, of which more than 80 were dower slaves, meaning they were granted to her upon her husband's death, while the remaining were in her custody until a minor son came of age to own them legally, while Washington had approximately 50. When Washington's dentures became ill-fitting and painful, he chose to get teeth from the people he owned. Records show that they were paid 122 shillings for 9 teeth, less than a third at the going rate at the time. Washington told a friend, quote, "I confess I have been staggered in my belief in the efficacy of transplantation," end quote. The payment did not diminish the terror for the chattel. The fact that Washington owned other people at all was a crime, and a grievous one at that. First of all, let's stop there with the false teeth, right? Where he took teeth from the people he owned. Can you imagine working backbreaking work as a chattel slave, where you are thought of as property? You're not even thought of as a person. And because this guy probably had bad dental hygiene and didn't take care of his teeth properly, he lost his teeth, so he takes yours out. You don't have anesthesia. You don't have anything to numb it. They took pliers, and I'll let your imagination finish. Can you imagine that happening to you? That's just the light part. That's just the lightest part of what people like him did. And yet we revere him as the father of this country. These are the truths that we need to come to terms with. But the father of our country didn't see things that way because he did not see Black people as fully human, endowed with unalienable rights. And so he did everything in his power to maintain his hold on his living, breathing capital. His story, sanitized for elementary school children, is a fundamental example of the lies told about our nation's history that keeps Americans ignorant of the truth and how it affects them today. The first capital of the United States was New York City, where Washington was sworn into office in 1789. The Residence Act passed in 1790 mandated that the capital be temporarily moved to Philadelphia for a period of 10 years before being permanently established along the Potomac River by 1800. From the start, Northern politicians were held hostage by the Southern plantation economy. Southerners insisted that the capital be located in a place that was decidedly dependent on the planter economy. Hence why we have Washington, D.C., where we have it. It's essentially in the South. The creation of the new capital city was an enormous victory for the slaveholding class. The peculiar institution was granted physical protection and the imprimatur of a government built to ensure its survival. A central political principle in the early days of this country was the maintenance and protection of the slavery system. However, anyone who believes in American superiority is expected to omit or at least downplay this fact to maintain the illusion of democracy and beneficence. Even the 10 years of governance in Philadelphia proved to be problematic. A 1780 Pennsylvania law guaranteed enslaved people the right to seek their freedom if they remained in the state for more than 6 months. This could have put Washington in a bind. But he had a solution. He rotated his human property for 6-month intervals between Pennsylvania and Virginia. He did this flagrant violation of a 1788 amendment to this law, which prohibited such actions. George Washington was a criminal. In 1791, Washington started by rotating 9 people, including a dower slave named Ona Maria Oni Judge. In a letter to his secretary, Tobias Lear, I wonder if he's related to Norman Lear, Washington mused on the slaves' potential access to freedom. This is what Washington says. At any rate, it might, if they conceived that they had a right to make it. If they had a right to it, make them insolent in the state of slavery. As all except Hercules and Paris are dour Negroes, it behooves me to prevent the emancipation of them. Otherwise, I shall not only lose the use of them, but many have them to pay for. If upon taking good advice, it is found expedient to send them back to Virginia, I wish to have it accomplished under pretext that may deceive both them and the public. George Washington was a criminal. Washington was serious about denying any opportunity for freedom. Oni Judge recalled her escape in an 1845 interview. Quote, whilst they were packing up to go to Virginia, I was packing to go. I didn't know where, for I knew that if I went back to Virginia, I should never get my liberty. I have friends among the colored people of Philadelphia, had my things carried there beforehand, and left Washington's house while they were eating dinner, end quote. Oni managed to flee to New Hampshire in 1796, but she was still not safe. The Fugitive Slave Clause in the Constitution allowed for her to be returned to bondage. and the Washingtons tried incessantly to get her back. With more than 300 human beings among their collective property, the escape of even one might put the entire enterprise on shaky ground. A friend of the Washingtons saw a judge in New Hampshire and informed him. The president wrote a letter to his Secretary of the Treasury, Oliver Wolcott, demanding his assistance in getting Judge back. Quote, I am sorry to give you or anyone else trouble on such a trifling occasion, but the ingratitude of the girl, this asshole, the ingratitude of the girl who was brought up and treated more like a child than a servant, and Mrs. Washington's desire to recover her, ought not to escape with impunity if it can be avoided. Washington sent intermediaries to try to promises of freedom. Those promises were lies. As a dower slave, she could not have been freed without compensation given to the Custis estate. And the Washingtons' determination to recapture her is an indication that they were unlikely to even contemplate such an effort. She avoided the attempts to entrap her and remained a free woman for the rest of her life. Not only did Washington not allow any of his slaves to go free, but he also did not countenance other white people doing things that might lessen his hold on this property. Sally Green was the abandoned wife of an overseer on Washington's Mount Vernon estate. When Washington learned in 1794 that she planned to open a small store in Alexandria, he was not pleased, and he wrote to his manager, William Pierce. Quote, caution Sally Green against dealing with my Negroes after she is fixed in Alexandria. If she deals with them at all, she will be unable to distinguish between stolen or not stolen things. And if her conduct should lay her open to suspicion, she need expect no further countenance or support from me, end quote. He was a jerk. George Washington was a bastard. My God. A great irony exists in the fact that Washington is now the blackest surname in the United States. Kerry Washington, Denzel Washington, Isaiah Washington. How many black Washingtons do you know? There's a ton of black Washingtons. How much you want to bet there's a Keisha Washington out there? She's probably watching right now. 90% of the Washingtons in America are black people. Huh. I've never met a white Washington. Never. The only white Washington I've ever seen was George Washington in the history books. Never met a white Washington. It is not clear how many of them may be descended from Washington or the enslaved people on his estate. Booker T. Washington claimed to have chosen the name randomly when he was a child. Most of the ancestors of today Washingtons probably chose the names as a way of identifying themselves with their country, a major irony in the face of what black people have had to contend with throughout this country's history. George Washington would express some reservations about slavery, exclaiming at one point that he wanted to, quote, be quit of Negroes, end quote. Yet he never freed any in his lifetime. He did not have the right to free Martha's dower slaves, nor those who belonged to the estate of her first husband, Daniel Parke Custis. But in his will, he did agree to free those he owned after Martha's death. This left his widow, Martha, afraid that she could be killed by people who would gain their freedom if she died. Abigail Adams said as much after a visit with her in 1800, quote, in the state in which they were left by the general to be free at her death, she did not feel as though her life was safe in their hands, many of whom would be told that it was their interest to get rid of her. She therefore was advised to set them all free at the close of the year. End quote. Martha decided to manumit or free the slaves belonging to her late second husband, George Washington. For her dower slaves, those she received from her first husband's estate, never gained their freedom. Upon her death, they were dispersed among her grandchildren, splitting up numerous families in the process. This is why Black people do a lot of family reunions. You ever wonder why Black people are always doing family reunions, especially in the South? And then you'll have a bunch of Black people have the same shirt on: Johnson family reunion, Smith family reunion, Washington family reunion, Jones family reunion, Brown family reunion. Why? Because we were split up. Our families were split up. Babies taken away from mothers, husbands taken away from wives, brothers taken away from sisters. That's how it happened all the time. And that's why family reunions are so popular, especially in the South. Washington was followed in the office of president by 11 other slave-holding men, 7 of whom owned slaves even while holding that office. Their slave ownership was not incidental to their achieving the highest office in the land, but was inextricably linked to that fact. Slaveholding was profitable, and it is logical that the elite classes of that time will be represented in presidential contests. So, of course, slave owners would be the people who would be the executives running this country, because they were the richest. They were white, they were male, and they had slaves. Slaves were capital. This is why companies like Wachovia, I think it was, and Aetna, these were insurance companies that actually insured slaves. So if your slave died, or if your slave ran away, or your slave got killed, then you would be awarded money because that slave was insured. They insured slaves like you insure a car. Remember, we were property. Animals, cows, oxen, whatever, they had more rights than we did. We were like tables and chairs. That's how we were regarded. The United States was committed to maintaining this institution, and whether Northern or Southern, nor president considered ending the practice until Abraham Lincoln was forced to confront the matter in 1861. Forced is the operative word. I'm stopping there. Next, we'll be reading John Adams when I do the next reading. And of course, it won't be a live, but yes, you guys will see that in the premiere. So next will be John Adams. We're going down the line of presidents, 1 to 45. So it's going to be an interesting time to read. Where's my bookmark? Okay. Okay. Oh, by the way, isn't it great? That's going to be my bookmark for this book. Anyway, so yes, that is the reading for this. This was toast to Auntie Margaret, because look, that was good. But this is something I think that's important. And while, I had on Marcel Dixon on Tuesday, and we talked about him running and talked about reparations and things like that, this is also deeply important in the discussion of reparations, right? Because you literally had the highest office in this land being held by 11 of them being slave owners. how many of those families that have descended from that still have that generational wealth down to this day? How many of the Washingtons, the Monroes, the Adams, how many of them still have that generational wealth down to this day? That generational wealth was built on our backs. I'll be honest with you. That is stolen money. That is stolen wealth. George Washington was a thief. He was a thief. He was a criminal. And I'm sick and tired of everybody going, oh my God, he was the father of this country and he was a great man. No, he wasn't. No, he wasn't. Because if he wasn't an honorable man, he wouldn't have had those slaves. And the thing is like, it's not like a lot of these people go, well, that was just the trend at the time to own slaves. No, they knew it was wrong back then. They knew it. And he could have said, you know what? No, I'm not going to do this. But it was so normalized. The wrong was so normalized that he owned slaves when he was only 11 years old. The wrong was so normalized. But you still knew it was wrong. And yet you fought to keep the institution in place. And they knew it was wrong because Britain abolished it because they were like, yeah, this is wrong. So if Britain knew it was wrong, they knew it was wrong. They did. They know we're human beings. They just didn't want to acknowledge it because they want. And the thing is that this is the thought. If you dehumanize people enough, then it makes treating them in a horrible way, in an awful way, more acceptable because you keep dehumanizing them in your head. And that's what they did. They did it to the indigenous people on occupied Turtle Island. That's what we're living on right now. And they did it to my ancestors here, similar to the way the Nazis did to the Jewish people. Because the Nazis, got to remember, the Nazis actually got their ideas from the presidents, the way the Europeans operated on occupied Turtle Island. That's how they got their ideas from. And then that's how they treated the Jewish people. And it's similar how Zionists right now are treating the Palestinians. So that's why this vicious cycle continues. Because if you continuously demonize and dehumanize a population of people, it makes it easier to oversee their destruction. That's why it's important to stand with all oppressed peoples. Because the constant dehumanization leads to tragedy, leads to catastrophe. What's the phrase go? Nobody's free until we're all free. It is important that we take a hard look at the history of this country. From Washington all the way down to Biden. It is important that we take a hard look, an honest look. And quiet as is kept, you know, when we talk about things like critical race theory and things like that, you have some white people that go, well, I don't want my kids to feel bad. That's okay. Let them feel bad. Let them sit with that. You want to know a very uncomfortable truth? Some of those white slave owners are also my ancestors too. Why do you think this last name exists on me? Where do you think this last name came from? It didn't come from Africa. Why do you think I'm part Welsh and Norwegian? Why do you think that's in my blood? So guess what? I got to sit with it too. So if I got to sit with what my ancestors did, who were slave owners, that means you got to do it too. And don't give me that, oh, well, my family immigrated here from Poland, or my family immigrated here from Italy or Germany or Ireland, back in the early 1900s. You still benefit by means of the lightness of melanin in your skin. You still benefit from it, the system that was set up. So therefore, you also have to sit with some of these things too. And if we Black people are able to come to terms with that, some of our ancestors are actually some of the horrible, decrepit people that own the other parts of our ancestors, then if we can come to terms with that, so can you. So do not give me that BS about, oh my God, critical race theory is going to make me feel bad. It's going to make me, stop being a snowflake and accept it. It grinds my gears. Stop being a snowflake, accept your family's history, accept that your ancestors did some horrible things. Yes. Because now, because they did some horrible things, guess what? They're my ancestors too now. I'm related to them too. I got to accept it. Accept it and change it. Move on. And then let's repair the damage that was done. Repair the damage that was done so that the people who were damaged, they're reset back to the way they were before the damage was ever caused. We call that reparations. And also, let's get rid of the system that caused the damage to be done in the first place, called. But yes, what? The hell? What? The heck just happened? Wait a minute. Why is my stream not playing on YouTube? Am I still coming through on YouTube? Oh, something happened. I don't know. Anywho, it went away. Okay. Please let me know if I'm still coming through on YouTube. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Whew. That was weird. Okay. It cut off and then, okay. And Dave says, I'm fine on Rumble? Really? It said, I don't know. Anyway, but thank you. But yes, that's something that I think we have to come to terms with, and just be honest with ourselves. I am very grateful for this book. This book just smacked me in the face initially. I mean, thank you so very much to Margaret Kimberly for writing this book. I cannot wait to get deep into this. But, yeah. So can't wait to read even more. So with that being said, did you like the stream? Go ahead and give the stream a like. Push me out into the algorithm. Go ahead. Shove me out there. All right. Now, while we're at it, just want to give a shout out to the patrons on Patreon, Coffee, as well as people who send me a little something through PayPal. Without you guys, I would not be able to do this. You guys make it happen, Captain. So I just want to thank all of y'all for the contributions that you guys do on this. It means the world to me. And yes, y'all are real ones. So thank you so very much to everybody for being a patron on Patreon as well as on Coffee. And yes, just to let you guys know, I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm still demonetized. So if you like to support the channel, you can support via Patreon or PayPal. Those are the primary places you guys can support. So thank you so very much. Let's go to the tiers so you guys can see what is what. What? Okay. Now, here are the tiers. We have JB members, Solidarity, Comrades, Jaybefaunters, Super Jaybefaunters, Super Duper Jaybefaunters, and Mega Jaybefaunters, like Megazord. Megazord has been initiated. Let me stop. All right. Okay. And to all brand new patrons, I just want to give a shout out and thank you in advance for becoming a patron and supporting the channel. Now, let's go to the chat. Okay. Oh my goodness. Let me put this out here. Boom. Why is this thing always... Sorry, I'm looking at something that's annoying the mess out of me right now. But let's go here. Chat on Rockfin. All right. So, Hempcar says, did he say Denzel? I did. And Hempcar says, have you ever read From Bullet to Ballot by Jacoby Williams? It's really good about Fred Hampton and Rainbow Coalition. Fed 50,000 kids in a day in 45 cities. What? Maybe they don't tell. Maybe they'll don't. Their kids end up like Ahmaud Arbery. And yes, the tube sometimes does annoy me. So thank you so very much for that. Let me check. I could have swore. No. Yeah, I had to disconnect. I had to disconnect the Rumble. So I'm sorry, guys. I don't know. It was having some issues with Rumble. My apologies. But yeah. And then let's go to the general chat here. Say hello to everybody. Let me see. All right. Cray says, isn't RBN whitewashed? They smeared Cornel West as a Zionist to gain subscribers from Jimmy Dore. Whitewashed. No. And they never said Cornel West was a Zionist. I don't know where you got that from. I don't think Dr. Cornel West is a Zionist, by the way. He's definitely not. In fact, he has expressed his solidarity with Palestinians time and time again. Could he use stronger language, in my opinion? A little bit. But at the same time, when it comes to Dr. Cornel West, he's not a Zionist at all. That is crazy. And saying that he was smeared as a Zionist, I do not agree with that. Charles K says FDR internment camps for Japanese Americans. Somebody want to talk to Japanese Americans about FDR? Jacqueline says, we not only need to learn about the horrible things that political leaders did in the past, but we have to learn what the consequences of that were. Yes. Yes. Oh, Annie Shah says, listening from Uruguay. Oh, welcome. Nice to have you. Okay. All right. Getting the international audience. Okay. Good to see you. Put your feet up. Grab a cup of tea. Randy says, I'm about to brew my final mug of tea for the evening too. Oh, see? Tea powers activate. Yes. Okay, let's continue. Let me see. Randy says, out of Syracuse. Nice. All right, out of Syracuse. Nice to have it. I've always, you know what? I always wanted to go to upstate New York. I've never been. I've only been to Manhattan. Is that Manhattan where Times Square is? I think so. But anyways, yeah, I've never really got to truly play around New York. I would love to though. Jacqueline says this will be an education for me because I don't know that much about U.S. history coming from the UK. Oh, okay. Okay, great. Thank you so very much. Good to see a quantum alchemist. The author, Miss Margaret Kimberly, says, I'm glad you're all enjoying the book. We are. Thank you very much. All right. Anisha says 1608, first slaves from Africa brought to Uruguay. Interesting. When did you guys abolish slavery in Uruguay? I'm curious. I'm gonna look out for that comment, but let me know when you guys actually abolished slavery. Did you guys ever abolish it? Because I know the largest Black population in the Western Hemisphere is actually in Brazil. There's a lot of Black people in Brazil. A lot. A lot of people don't know that. Roger Meadows says, Peanut Man, George Washington Carver, Chicago Mayor Harold Washington. Yeah, there's a lot of Black Washingtons, man. It's like that's associated with Black people now. Let me see. Dan Ramales says, super grateful for the stream. Oh, you're very welcome. Nice to have you. Welcome to the chat. Dave L says, F white supremacy. This white guy agrees. RBN bookmarks. Yeah, maybe I should make my own bookmarks for this channel. Maybe I can do that. Huh. Give me an idea, Dave. Thank you. Roger Meadows says, look at the screenshot I sent you. Delineation is important. Delineation. You're using all these big words. Oh yeah, I know this drapetomania. Yeah, I know about this. Okay, so drapetomania was a term coined by Samuel Cartwright from the Greek drapetes, a runaway, in mania, madness. He defined it as a mental illness that caused African slaves in the U.S. to flee their captivity. Psychiatrist Thomas Zaz wrote that perhaps the most famous example of misusing the term mental illness is drapetomania, or runaway slave syndrome. Medical historian Harriet Washington understatedly defines drapetomania as a lack of enthusiasm for slavery. Yeah, I heard of drapetomania. Drapetomania, a disease that never was. Hecotin International. Yeah, thank you so much for that. Yeah, so back in the days, drapetomania was actually considered a disease, a mental illness. So if you were an African slave and you wanted your freedom and you tried to flee for your freedom, they said that was a mental illness. Crazy, right? I learned about drapetomania from Dr. Joy DeGruy. And if you guys have never listened to her lecture about post-traumatic slave syndrome, I highly recommend it. It is not for the faint of heart, but it is deeply educational, and it talks about white supremacy as well as how slaves were treated in this country and how it really goes deep into our DNA as Black people and how we carry the trauma throughout our generations, even down to this day. It is hot. Actually, let me see if I can find it on YouTube so I can link it. I highly recommend it. It's called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome by Dr. Joy DeGruy. Let me see. Yep, here it is. If you guys have not, let me see. So she called it at the time post-traumatic disorder, but it is deep, and I hope you guys enjoy it or get a lot out of it, I should say. So it's post-traumatic slave syndrome. And I'll put that there. And yes, Roger, I'll get to that tip on Rockman. Thank you. All right, so thank you so much for that. Let me see. Just trying to get to people who I haven't got to. Dave says it's insidious too. People often don't realize they're looking at another group in a dehumanizing way. Sometimes, that is. Yes. And I would argue that a lot of people are looking at Palestinians that way. A lot of people, in fact, a lot of us Black people are taught to look at other Africans in a dehumanizing way. We were taught to look at Africans in a dehumanizing way because we're always taught that, oh, well, you guys are better off now than you guys were than you guys were when you're still in Africa. Look at how they are. Look at their countries. Look how their people treat them. They're living in mud huts and they got flies all over them and all this stuff. And that's what we're constantly told and shown as Africans. You know how many times where we actually met Africans maybe in school, like young African kids in school, and you know the insult will be calling him an African booty scratcher. You know that stuff was because we, you know, Black American kids were taught to look at other people who look like us and look down on them and dehumanize them. And this is why the diaspora wars still exist today, because they're taught through colonization that we're horrible in some ways, and we're taught through racism and white supremacy that they over there are horrible in some ways. When in reality, no, they're damaged by colonization and imperialism. We're damaged by chattel slavery and white supremacy here. But we are all have been damaged by essentially the same system. So when it comes to, you know, the diaspora, we have to take this notion in our head and stop dehumanizing others, really generally, but also stop dehumanizing people who look like us, just because their origins are not here in the United States. Solidarity has to start there. Andrew says almost at 4K. Yeah. I'm pretty excited for it. Last time I checked, I was at, I think it was like 30, like 29, 28 subs away from 4,000. So if you guys have not, if you guys actually enjoy my content and you're watching, right, especially right now, like on Twitter, then if you guys want to, you guys can move over to YouTube and then just subscribe to the channel, right? You guys can actually do that and help me get over 4,000. That actually helps, you know, I appreciate it. So if you're watching on the Twitter side, go ahead and move over to YouTube. It's appreciated. All right. Let me see. Dan says, JB, how long has RBN been around? How long you been a part of it? RBN has been around for 3 years, and I actually have been a part of it for 3 years. I was one of the original members when RBN first started. It was in April 1st of 2020 when we did our first show. That was a Thursday. And so I was part of the original planning of it. I did not come up with the concept. The people who actually came up with the concept and founders are Nick, Rome, and CJ. I was just invited, in the early stages of it when they said we have this idea, and they brought people like me, Jackie, and RJ in. And then it was the 6 of us, and then we created what was at the time Fred Hampton Leftist. So, yeah, so I've been a part of it since the beginning. And thank you so very much. Grateful to Lee Camp for introducing me to you all at RBN. Oh, thank you. It was great to be on Lee's show on Thursday. That was lovely. Interesting question, Jacqueline. Have you and other RBN members ever thought about writing a book about your political beliefs, how you got together in your mutual aid programs? I mean, that would be interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting idea, but I don't know. I never thought about myself writing a book. I have a Substack though, which I do write articles. So I don't know. That's an interesting idea though. Thank you. Dave says Prejudential is $13.25 if anyone was curious, from Daddy B. But what are you going to do? Yeah, if you guys would like to, it's actually not that expensive for a book. It's actually pretty affordable. So if you guys would like to, you guys can always buy it. I recommend just, getting the, buying the hard copy. I got the, I think there's a hardback, but I got the paperback. Let me see. All right. So yes, it's true. Yeah. Thank you so very much. Now let me go to the rock bin again, because I know Roger put a tip on rock bin. Oh wait. Thank you for the tip on Rockman Roger. He says, we often talk about how Black, Asian, and Spanish immigrants who came here after the passage of the 1965 Immigration and Naturalization Act, when they got certain things afforded to them that were never afforded to us. However, this was the same thing that white folks from Europe who immigrated here during the whole Ellis Island thing got as well. So we're passed over 2 times. Yeah, unfortunately, that's, yeah. Thank you so very much for that link, Hemkar. This book by Dr. Weinstein proves that the CIA isn't psychiatry and destroyed this guy's life. Ooh, wow. They didn't say, let me see, didn't they say women who read too much were crazy 150 years ago? Yes, they did, actually. And he says, look at the screenshot above in DM. Hang on. You see. Oh. Hang on. Okay. It says of the 12.6% of the United States residents who identify as Black, around 10.3% were Native Black American or ethnic African Americans who are direct descendants of West Central Africans brought to U.S. as slaves. These individuals made up well over 80% of all Blacks in the country. You know what's crazy about it, though, Roger, is the fact that we're still only 13% of the population. It's like we made up this massive amount of chattel slaves and yet we're still only 13% of the population. It's like we should be way more, but it's not, you know. And part of me thinks it's primarily because essentially we had our own the lawn was being mowed for us too, constantly, because we were dying early. And on top of that, dying early, we were, you know, massacred constantly. And in Dr. Joy DeGrew's lecture, one of the things she talked about was there were laws that were actually passed to protect people who beat slaves to death. And a lot of the beating of human beings to death was actually beating children to death. And it was a lot of slave-owning white women that were beating Black African children who are chattel slaves to death. So, yeah. Something that a lot of people don't talk about. Yeah. So, let's continue here. And then Hipcar, thank you very much for the tip on Rock Band. Says psychiatry and the CIA, victims of mind control by Dr. Harvey Weinstein. That must be a different Harvey Weinstein. Is praised by the heads of Yale and Berkeley on the back. There's a Dr. Epstein that does integral work too, like Evil Twin. Oh no. Imagine having the name Harvey Weinstein and you're not that guy. Imagine having the name Jeff Epstein and you're not that guy. Oh my gosh. Jeez Louise, Hempgar. Oh no. I would be so embarrassed. I would probably have to get myself a name change. Because like I could not. Like I already shared the name. I already share a name with a famous music producer. His name is also Jaybefaunt Leroy. And we're probably related somehow because I think his family probably comes from Essex County, Virginia, just like mine. But yeah, it's crazy, man. I would not want to have that name. Crazy. Dan says, any suggestion on how an average person in California can make some type of income and help causes and orgs that are not supporting U.S. nationalism? It depends, man. Dan, it depends. Like if you, Mother's Day is coming up, you can make some gift baskets and sell them on the side of the road, right? And then say, yeah, the proceeds from this are actually going towards, you know, helping out, let's say, a tenants organization or the unhoused, or, you know, teaching children or something like that, right? And then if people want to pay, like you'll have like a base of what something costs, and even if they like, let's say the gift basket costs like $20, right? And it's like that's the base. But if you want to pay for this above $20, you know, that $20 that you pay and anything above it, 100% of the proceeds go to what we're doing on the ground. You can do something like that, right? And then the time that you took in order to make these gift baskets, that's you donating your time. So you're not actually going to pay yourself for that. Or you may end up just paying like part of it just for the cost of the materials. But then you just, I mean, that's just off the top of my head. Like, or if you have like orange trees or papaya trees or something like that. Or if you know somebody that has a garden and you want to sell either juice on the side of the road, or if it's legal in your area, because I don't want you to get in trouble. Or if you want to sell fruit on the side of the road, you know, because there's a lot of Mexican people that sell fruit on the side of the road, you know, and they probably have fields where, you know, they actually own, and then they probably grow that themselves so they can make money off of that stuff. All they got to do is harvest and sell them on the side of the road. If you can do that and then help either feed people or help people who are unhoused or what have you, you know, you can do something like that. But I mean, that's just an idea. It's like, and then you just like go out like the day, like a few days before Mother's Day, you know, and I'll be honest with you, I think some guys would love a Father's Day basket if you get things that you know men like. Start doing Father's Day baskets and stuff like that too. Like, I don't see Father's Day baskets being sold on sides of the roads and stuff like that. I think that would be a cool idea. And then on top of that, you can also do one for Valentine's Day, you know, stuff like that. So, I mean, that's just an idea off the top of my head. I don't know if it worked, but hey, you know, and then use the proceeds to actually do mutual aid. But that's a good question, though. I mean, I applaud you for asking that. Thank you so much, Dan. Annie says 13%. Well, then you think about all the early deaths, illnesses, murders, etc. Yes. Dave L says, now that I think about it, Eddie Murphy really played into the making fun of Africans thing in the 80s. Fufu. Yeah. Also Coming to America. I know. It's one of my favorite movies too. I love that movie. My son works. What is he now? No. Do not listen to my presence. I shall deal with him myself. You know, I you know, I love that movie. But kind of does make fun of Africans a little bit, you know, but yeah. Put a suck in it, Joffy. The boy's in love. Oh my goodness. Jacqueline says, not sure if we should be using euphemisms for killing and massacres. Not everyone knows what the mowing lawn actually is. This is not a criticism of you, Jay-Z, but the criticism of euphemism. Yes, I understand. But I'm trying to link it with the Zionist occupation. See what I mean? But yes, the mowing the lawn is what Israel calls the massacres of Palestinians that they do periodically to keep the population at a certain level. And yes, it's as horrible as it sounds to anybody. Randy says, my lily white ass thinks y'all should get some reparations. My ancestors were chilling in Holland and Latvia until after World War II and had nothing to do with this. Thank you, Randy. Lily White. Norman says JB has the brain of a fly. Moth, maybe. Anyway, so yeah. So yeah, I'm gonna head on out because I gotta get going. Roger says the mowing the lawn in Flint right now. I've been checking JC of SC 10th anniversary of Flint. They should take Medicare for All bill and run as a CBI amendment. Jay, we have the progressive New York State Assemblyman named Harvey Epstein. Okay. Yee. Okay. Thanks for that, Roger. All right, so I'm gonna head on out, guys. Plus, I'm hungry. I need to find something to eat. I think I'm gonna have some soup. But anyways, I'm gonna continue the reading of this book in the next week, Prejudential. So we're gonna continue in that. Also, stay tuned for Of Water in the Spirit by Melodoma Prechisome. We're going to continue the reading there. And then we're going to continue the reading of The Will to Change by Bell Hooks. So we're going to be talking about this next week. Also on Tuesday, Ron Placone will be joining me. So that's going to be a great conversation. I can't wait to have with him. It's been a while since I've had him on, so I cannot wait to have that conversation with Ron Placone because Ron's always a fun person to talk to. It's nice to have him, so it's good. And also, by the way, if you guys have not already, yes, I am still in the process of trying to find a place to live because, well, it's harrowing right now to try to find some place because, you know, of course, they're selling the place that I live, and I only have... Now I have, give or take, 27 days to leave. Yeah. So still trying to find a place to live, but if you guys want to assist with that, you can either become a patron on Patreon. That helps. Or if you guys want to send me anything through PayPal, you can do that. Or if you guys want to become a patron on Coffee, that helps too. So thank you very much for that. And so that helps me out too. Now, with that being said, I am going to head on out. I said that 5 times already, but I mean it this time. Look, water your plants, water yourselves. Leave the world, what do I always say? Better than you found it, right? Smoke them if you got them, drink them if you got them. If you ain't got them, then watch something funny because joy is revolutionary, or study history and study the accurate, objective history, because you will prevent yourselves from repeating the grotesque parts of history. I love you for watching. I love you for reading with me, and stay tuned for the next episode. Mwah! Forehead kisses to every single one of you. I will see y'all in the next one. Thank you so very much for watching my channel, and I deeply appreciate it from the top and bottom of my heart. If you wish to support the channel further, so I can keep bringing you content that is educational and informative, you can become a patron on patreon.com/Jaybefaunt. You can find that link in the pinned comment or in the description below. No matter what you give, you'll be supporting independent media and education that helps make the world better. Thank you so much, and you can watch more of my content here. Mwah! Forehead kisses, and have a beautiful day.